Hello. This is the very last, I hope, in the series of videos I've been putting together on functional programming in R. Our goal in this series has been to create a generative artwork system, which we've called Ash Tree, that produces pretty pictures like the one that we're currently looking at. And I like this system. It's kind of fun. But one of the things about the way that it operates is that you kind of, in order to create these trees, you start from something little and then you apply the same idea, the same operation over and over and over again, just in different ways. And that kind of makes this sort of artwork a natural candidate for functional programming. Uh, which was actually the reason I designed it. I designed this to be a useful teaching tool. I didn't mean for it to be quite as nice and entertaining as it's ended up being. So what we've done is we've learned how to write functions in R, and what I've tried to do, and over the course of the last several videos, as I've gone and built this system and played around with it and made a bunch of mistakes and then tried to fix them, is talk about just the process of how to go about just saying, okay, well, this chunk of code here goes, whoop, let's just chuck that there in a function, and then we build up a bunch of these little helper functions, and then we go, these helper functions are really cluttering up my code, so we just sweep those aside into another script in which all of the helper functions can live, and then all of the worker functions that do all of the growing and the iterating and the splitting and the tree parts, all of those get swept into another happy little place that's filled with all of our worker functions. And then at the very end, what we end up doing is writing a system like where we learned how to use some of the functional programming tools in the per package, and what that does is let us, instead of trying to talk about doing things over and over and over again in a loop, it just lets you say, okay, given this is the input, please map it onto that output, or please accumulate it over this input structure. And that, I tend to think, is a much cleaner way of thinking about the kinds of operations that you're doing with functions. And so that's basically been our goal. So we have the system that's more or less complete, and really the only thing that I want to do left with it is, um, yeah, is let's try and make our system a little prettier. And I mean pretty in a couple of senses. First off, what I want to do is organize and tidy my code a little further. You'll notice that a lot of these videos have started with me going, okay, let's stop and tidy things up. And that's my first step this time too. So let's go back to our code that we've been developing as we go and think, okay, as we've gone, there have been a bunch of things that I've just dropped into functions along the way. Like there's this all scales thing, which was in one of our helper functions. And what that's talking about is, well, when I take an old tip and I turn it into a new tip, how long is the branch going to be? And what are the possibilities for for the length of the new branch? Could it be longer? Could it be shorter? Can it be little teeny tiny one? Could it be, sizes? That I just picked a bunch of arbitrary values and just chucked it into this little vector here for the purposes of developing. But really, when you're getting to the point now of wanting to make this into a generative art system, this is the kind of thing your user wants to play around with. I don't want this hidden away in a helper function. I want that to be right up at the front. So let's do this. I'm just going to go cut over here, and I'm just going to chuck it up the top like this. I'll explain what I'm doing in a moment. But the gist of what I'm going to try and do is get all the things that were the source of my arbitrary choices along the way, chuck them up here because we're going to turn those into parameters, so that we can fiddle around with our art system. Okay, so that was one. Wait, no, we were in the help things. So the other there's another one. All angles. That's not a thing that needs to be buried away. That's something I want to be user facing. So let's go boop, and chuck that over here. Boop. I'm loopy. It's the end of the night. For me anyway. It's like, God, it's almost 9 o'clock. This is my bedtime. Okay, so what else do we have? Nothing in here in the rest of the helper functions is something like that. So now these are true helper functions. They're not actually doing any of the substantive artistic choices for us. So that's good. All right, let's pop over here, over to our workers functions, and let's see if there's anything like that. Do we want the saplings thing values to be something the user can customize? I mean, I guess it could be, but I don't really feel like it. I'm just going to leave that where it is. This all looks fine. I might need to tweak this later on, but none of this is arbitrary values that are being passed along. Okay, there's our draw tree function. That's probably because we're just sticking with black and white images and we're not trying to draw this one in color. Like there's nothing here really that I want to customize, so we can leave that function alone. Okay, now we've got our two loops. This is something that might change, right? So how many branches should each tip spawn? Is our tree going to grow wide or is it going to grow long? So how wide does it grow? That feels like something that you might want the user to control. So let's just, instead of saying from 1 to 3, let's go 1 to cycles. Right. Okay. Save. And same. No, wait. That's not cycles. That's splits. How many times are we going to split? Off of. So this is how many times do we split each individual thing? Sorry. I was going to call it splits because I wanted it to be plural. Over here, same deal. How many iterations, how tall should our tree grow? So we'll call that the cycles. And, oops, yeah, Control save. Okay, cycles. And now there's nothing left in the workers functions either that is a user tweakable parameter. So I better go back up here and define those two things up here. So we'll call it cycles. And how many of those do we want? We're going to go, well, look, we should do it different every time, right? Let's make this, we'll make it 8 cycles now. And we'll have splits to be 2. Okay. Now, I'm hoping that for, there's a part of you that's kind of going, you can just pull stuff out of functions like that? Really? Yeah, I'm playing some silly, I'm being tricky here. And I promise I shall reveal the trickery very shortly. Okay, so let's just check. Nothing in my environment. I'm not doing any fancy stuff. Let's go source this thing. And we go, boom, boom, boom. This has worked. It's given us a tree. How? I mean, this is the thing that is often super puzzling to people who have just started learning the functions. I've defined a bunch of variables up here. And then what I've done is sourced these functions and gone, okay, somehow my functions that I've defined over here in these scripts over here have access to these variables. Even though, let me just check, but I'm pretty sure, let's not look at helpers, let's go over here to workers. At no point was splits included as an argument grow multi. That is super weird. Okay. We shall attempt to work out what is going on. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go Control X. Will I? Seriously, cut. Control X. Thank you. Paste. Control V. Thank you. Just move that below there and see what happens. And then what we'll do is again clear everything and let's source it. And it's worked again. Okay, that's funny. So it's not an order of things. That's just weird. Let me try instead and restart the session, shall we? So we'll go restart R. And there we go, we're ready to go. Okay, so there's definitely nothing there. Source it. And pretty sure that was supposed to do something. Just going to try and source that again. There we go. I think this is just my usual. I think this is just the problem I've been having all along with things freezing on me for no obvious reason. Okay. So, what the heck? The answer, and I am absolutely not going to go into a lot of detail about it, is hidden, or the easiest way I think of finding it is to look in the environment pane. If I just click on this here, I go global environment is a place where I find all of the variables that I've just created, right? And in here are a bunch of packages I've loaded, like here's one, package Tibble. If I just click on that and look in here, I go, oh, there's a whole bunch of things in there. Let's just ignore the promise part for the moment. In fact, I'm not even going to talk about promise objects here. But we've got something that looks suspiciously like Tibble functions and things like that. So when I have in my code, I called the Tibble function, right, to create right up here, to create sapling. I created Tibble. When I did library tidyverse and library tidyverse to library Tibble, or if I went up, let's do a simpler one and go over here. When I went library here, there's the here function right there. It's in this environment here. The here package describes an environment, and when I load it, that environment gets added to a thing. Let's call it the scope. It gets added there, and what that means is that any environment that is a child or that is underneath this package is able to access the functions that are inside it. So the global environment can actually call or use the functions that are in any of these packages, any of these environments, because they are higher up on the scope chain. That's about as much theory as I want to go for right now. So the point I want to get at here is when I defined my functions, grow sapling and all of that kind of stuff, when these functions themselves do their fancy or their funny little internal stuff, they're doing it in their own hidden environments, and those environments are children of the global environment. She says, hoping she's remembered the theory. I'm actually pretty terrible at remembering these things. So they can have access to the stuff that's up there in the global environment, which is kind of handy in some senses, but it's not really the kind of it's not really what I like doing. Like that little trick of relying on, well, we'll just assume that the correct variable that we want to make use of is somewhere else in the scope chain. It's probably better to pass these things as explicit arguments. Okay, so let's do this instead and just let's instead create, we'll just call it param equals list. And we've got all the things that we wanted. List of, these are going to be the parameters for our artwork, and we'll go cycles equals 8, splits equals 2, scales, because I'm tired of calling it all scales and I want it to be the same number of characters, damn it, is going to be just this. Right, so just chuck that up there. And angles, agnils, of course. Yes, I'm going to work on my typing. I know. And paste that over there. And so then what we're going to do is adjust our grow tree function so that it takes a single argument, and it's just going to take that parameter as its input. Okay, so now that we've done param, oh my god, Okay, now that we've done that, we better modify the grow tree function so that it can handle this input. So it's going to get a list of parameters that the artwork is going to use. So let's go into our worker functions and go grow tree. That has to take an argument of params. Cool. So that's all right. So this over here won't be cycles anymore. It will be param dollar cycles. Okay, cool. Is that? Let's just check. Param dollar cycle, so it'll pull that thing out. Okay, we're going to run into the same kind of thing here with grow multi. So if we look up here under grow multi, that's going to itself require some parameters, right? So why don't we just modify that so it has a second argument, param, and this will be param dollar splits, okay? So over here now we'll have to modify our recipe as well so that it just passes the param list down to grow multi. Okay, so we're making progress now. Okay, so now when we go over here, we're going to grow something from tips, okay? Does grow, okay, that draw tree function is obviously in the wrong spot, so let's just go Control X, and that should really be at the bottom, right? Conceptually speaking, draw tree is the last thing in the sequence. So, okay, we've got grow tree, grow multi. Okay, so here is our grow from function, right? That we're calling inside this recipe. Almost certainly that's going to need to use the param as well. So we'll pass that. We'll just pass that along, and we'll put that in here. Go tips param. Okay, so what are we doing here? Here we need to go. We've got our mutate, and it's calling a bunch of these little helper functions. So the helper functions themselves need something. Let's go back to work out what the helper functions need. It's useful to actually look at them. The adjust angle function, if you recall, is adjust angle. I'm looking at adjust scale. So what it's doing is it's sampling from all the scales, right? So what we need to do is have an input parameter here called all scales, because at some point those scales, like that list, this thing over here, is going to have to filter its way down, all the way down through all of those grow functions into grow from. And so then what I'll do is under adjust scale, and I'll just go scale param, and what I'll just do is just pass the scales variable. I've done it again. Okay, so there's our param scales is going over to, it's just going to pull the scales variable out of this list, as that list is just filtering through all of those little steps. And then over here, it's just going to rename it like this. As far as adjust scales concerned, that input is going to be called all scales, and now it's going to get passed through there. So we'll save that there. Obviously, we're going to have a similar thing that's happening to adjust angle, so that's going to have all angles as an input. And let's just check our other helpers. Radians, that's fine, that doesn't need any modification. Adjust X, that doesn't need anything modifying it either. We didn't pull anything out of those functions, so we're not going to have to change anything. Okay, so that's good. So let's go back over to our workers and go over here. So that should be param dollar angles. Okay, and I did it again. Okay, so we have now saved that, and I think we have now modified everything in a way that is really nice and clean. So the structure of what we've got is one function that is exposed to the user, like they would open up ashtree.r and all they see is, okay, here are the packages, here are the two files that contain our helper and worker functions, these are the parameters that define our art. We might want to say that, to be a bit more precise about it, we should say that the seed is going to be a parameter as well. So we'll say seed equals 3, set seed as param dollar seed, and then we do our art. So now we have things so that the user sees things in this really nice structure. Load packages, source relevant scripts, define the parameters that correspond to our art, and then do the stuff that we actually care about. If they care deeply about what is actually going on in our package, well, it's not a package yet, but it's very close to one. If they care about what's going on in our system, then they can delve into the workers functions and find out what's going on under the hood. They could delve further in and go, well, what's still going on inside these helper functions and so on. But for the most part, if you're just going to play with the artwork, it's nicer just to have it clear from the beginning which things are the parameters of the art. Okay, I should check to make completely certain. We'll restart R again. So go back to my... Yeah, that shouldn't even be there. Okay, my machine froze on me again. Okay, so you can see, oh look, under the, since I was playing around with that before, you'll notice there is no package here. There is no ggplot. None of the tidyverse packages are in that little list of things. They haven't been added to the scope chain because I haven't called this line. I haven't done that. When I do that, it loads everything, and there are all of our tidyverse packages. When I go to the next line and go library here, it tells me there's the location of my project. And if we look over in our scope chain, which has frozen on me again, which is okay. I don't know if this is visible at all. Okay, I'm hoping. Hey, there we go. Ah. Oh, my machine is not happy with me today. Please work. Hey, I'm hoping we're back. All right. Oh, it was really unhappy about something. Okay, we better finish this video off quickly, I think, before my machine decides to die. Yeah, it's really, really unhappy. Oh, wow. Okay, let's go back over here. Hopefully save that. Source it. And, okay, now it's drawing our picture for us. All right, we've got out of my craziness. So what you can see is that this structure here actually does what I wanted it to do. So we've got our packages. It's kindly, thanks to my computer freezing on me, deleted the sourcing command, so I'd better fix those. So this is slightly longer than it should be. File equals here, and then that would be helpers dot r, and we'll have another one, source here, workers dot r. Okay, so we save that, and now we have our system that does what we want it to. So we've got everything nice and neat in a nice clean sort of format. So now you can play around with it and kind of go, all right, well, what other things do we want it to do? Well, let's just try one that looks like this. So let's change the set of scales that are involved. Maybe we'll run it for 13 cycles, save that and source it. And hopefully we will end up with, this one will probably take a little longer to draw. Okay, something that looks super pretty. Like, that's actually the kind of thing that I would be happy to say is decent generative artwork. You could write another function from here that goes on and exports it to a PNG file or whatever. But we basically have it. It's done. Um, we are now like functional programmers. And so I'm going to stop and say, well, happy artwork, I guess. And thank you for listening. All right. Yeah, I'm done.